Welcome to another figure week, hard surface week, organic week.
Hey everyone, my name is Ahmed Al-Douri. I'm a concept artist and former instructor at Art Center College of Design, Brainstorm, CCS, CGMA, and various other places. And I would like to introduce to you this digital painting course that I've created. But before we get into anything, I just want to thank you for the support you've all given me this whole time. And with the support of so many of you, I've been able to put together everything I know about painting into this digital painting course. You want to become a pro illustrator, concept artist, or even just a hobbyist, but you don't have a clear map to get there. And that's where I come in. I spent the last 6 months compiling everything I know from my 20 years of art practice, and I've turned it all into a map. Starting with foundations such as rendering shapes, color theory, painting basic subjects, understanding brushwork, brush economy, all that fun stuff, deconstructing the skull, drawing it from every angle, all the way to master studies, stylized painting, and you'll find yourself at the end of the course doing a concept art project based on everything that we learn in the first 14 lessons. So how does it work? Well, you sign up, you watch the lectures, do the assignments, post them to the community page if you want, and treat it as a self-study, except for those of you who have signed up for the weekly meeting, where I personally critique your work in a virtual classroom setting. I believe learning by repetition is super important. That's what I've sort of presented a lot in this course, and the assignments are tailored for that, as adapted from my time teaching at Art Center. And each of these lessons have step-by-step explanations in real time. If you've ever seen my videos, you know exactly how I teach. And this course is intended to be a substitute for a college level course, but you don't have to pay the $4,000 or $5,000 per class, racking up maybe $200K in debt. With my custom design course, you'd be paying a fraction of that. And of course, I also have payment plan options if you don't want to pay for the whole thing at once. Thank you for watching this, and I'll see you soon.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Digital Artcast. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. It's really great to have you all here. I'm hoping wherever you are in the world or whatever you're doing, you're staying safe, and of course you are being creative as always. And I'm hoping that these podcasts, these conversations are something that can help you get through dark times, good times, creative times, and everything in between. Again, today we have another amazing guest, someone that, I've noticed through socials was someone who had a legacy in the industry and, a real setup of some amazing projects that he's worked on. And I thought, we usually have, some of the young bucks on here who are just kind of fresh-eyed and ready to go in the industry, but someone maybe who was a vet, I think would be another good perspective on how the industry works. And today we are talking to Craig Stitt. So hi, Craig. How are you doing?
Hello. Glad to be here. Hope I can answer some questions and give some insights.
Yeah, definitely. So we were kind of talking before we started recording, just had some kind of banter and back and forth, and we were talking about your time in the industry and kind of how many amazing projects you've kind of touched in the time you've been an artist. Everything from Ratchet and Clank, which we were talking about, which is one of my all-time favorite franchises, Spyro, many other games. But then you go even kind of further back than that, because you were also working with Sega at one point, and you worked on titles for them, stuff like Comic Zone and Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah, that was pretty incredible. I got the start in the industry. It never crossed my mind to go into the games industry. This would have been early '90s,
Yep.
and well, because and I was doing computer graphics, but it was really kind of boring stuff. It was pie charts
Right.
and occasionally something kind of artistic, but it was a lot of text and pie charts for business meetings.
Right.
And I get a call. At the time I was married and was complaining a lot about work, and so I'd come home and my wife at the time would have the want ads out from the newspaper and have stuff circled.
Yeah.
And she actually called me one day.
Mm-hmm.
She goes, "I found your job. I found your dream job."
Right.
And it was an ad in the newspaper saying, "Wanted video game artist and game designer, no experience necessary."
Oh, okay. Wow.
I'm like, "Oh, okay."
You'd never see that now.
No, you don't see that now. And well, you didn't even see it then.
Yeah.
It was Mark Cerny.
Oh, wow.
Who was starting the first internal development team for Sega of America. So prior to that, stuff was either third party or being done in Japan.
Right, of course.
This was the first in-house development team in the United States. And so he was going to be bringing some artists. So he was going to be people over from Japan.
Right.
But the Americans on the team, he wanted people from outside the industry.
Right.
He wanted to train people to make games the way he wanted to make games.
Right.
And no experience necessary.
Right. So he would do all the kind of lifting and shifting for you guys, and you would just kind of follow suit.
Yeah. And so, so that was, just somewhere I still got that little piece of news clipping. I can't find it though. I know I kept it.
A keepsake, yeah. But that must have been really interesting as well, because now Mark Cerny is such a huge name in the industry, right?
Yeah, he's incredible. I haven't talked to him in years, but he's one of the few people that I would come back to the industry to work with again.
Right. Yeah.
He's almost a superpower where he can look at something, look into the future, and see what needs to be done.
Right.
So that's relevant by the time you get it done. That's specifically true when we get talking about Spyros. His suggestion about Spyro is why Spyro is successful.
Yeah. So you when you took that first job, what was your kind of first project or the first kind of thing you were kind of
The very first thing I worked on was Kid Chameleon for the Genesis.
Classic. Yeah.
And so, actually, I don't have any tattoos. I'm thinking about getting one, midlife crisis or something. And it's one of the ones on my short list of what I want to do is the knight from Kid Chameleon, because that was the first character I ever did. That was the first video game art I ever did.
And that was pixel art, obviously, at the time.
Oh yeah, pixel by pixel by pixel. And that's something I think people today don't really appreciate.
No. I mean, Photoshop is a whole thing now where you have a million brushes, a million colors. Yeah.
You don't worry about colors. You worry about memory, but in a very different kind of way.
Yep.
You literally had 8 colors or 16 colors and 32 pixels by 32 pixels, not 3,000 pixels or
4K, 8K. Yeah.
You had 32.
Yeah. Wow. Incredible. I mean, it's weird to think about the limitations even back then, because I think about, the early days of even 3D, and now with ZBrush, with Maya, with a lot of those programs, polygons are a thing of the past almost, especially with Unreal 5. I mean, people can put almost their high poly straight into the engine, and it's crazy.
It would be interesting as well. Just the transitions, just from the pixel art into the 3D we started doing once we did with Disruptor. We're kind of jumping ahead here, but
of course,
the leaps and bounds just between each game was huge.
I mean, you think how far the game industry's came since the early 90s. You're only talking a space of maybe 20 years. And now stuff even with like VR, AR, I find it crazy because we look back at the start of the film industry, right, and back in the 1920s, and how far that's come in 100 years. It's crazy to think how give 100 years, like where would we be? And scary. Yeah, scary. So you done Kid Chameleon. That was your first gig, and that was also
the first game was Kid Chameleon.
Yeah.
And one of the fun things back on those old games is you could look at the screen and go, I literally touched every pixel on that screen.
Yep. The environment, the characters.
Yeah. And because there was like 4 or 5 artists working on it, but you could have a section where literally, okay, I did those enemies, and this is one of my environments, and literally everything on there is mine.
Yep.
Where now the teams are bigger and everything's huge, and you're doing, you have people doing, well, you're doing the grass, and you're doing the rocks, and you're doing the trees, and you're doing this set of enemies.
Yep.
Or this portion of this animation for this set of enemy. But so we did Kid Chameleon, and then very fortunate break. So interesting story about the very first time I ever saw Sonic. We're working on Kid Chameleon. Mark Cerny was hoping that we could create the mascot for Sega. Because Sega was looking for a mascot because they needed something to go beat up on Mario.
Right, of course.
And so we were hoping Kid or Kevin, or whatever his name was. And we got this. I can't remember how far along in the game we are, and we get this early playable version of this game, and it's Sonic. And so we all go into the conference room and we play it. We played it for a few minutes, and it was beautiful.
Yeah,
you played it for a few minutes and put it down, went back to work.
Right.
And sometime a few months later, or a month or two later, we get an updated version of it. We go in and play it. Now we're fighting over who gets the controller. In my mind, the only thing I remember, the big difference I remember was on the first time we played it, it didn't have the ring splash.
Right.
So Spyro's running around. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. The character is great. His little idle animation, it was like, oh, why? That's awesome. Why didn't we think of that? Great character, beautiful backgrounds, but it was fun, but it wasn't addictive. Jump ahead. Now the ring splash is in there. Now we're fighting over who, hey, it's my turn to play it. Yeah. And at that point also we went, crap. This is Sega's new mascot. This is Sega's new mascot. But then fortunate things happened for for me at least, is like I said, Mark had started STI, Sega Technical Institute, right, with the intent of having Japanese come over from Japan, and then taking some Americans and sending the Americans to Japan and doing this kind of cross pollination. Right. So the Japanese could learn kind of the American mentality, and the Americans could learn Japanese mentality. Right. And no Americans. We never sent anybody over to Japan to work, but we did. About half the team at STI was Japanese. Right. Well, one of those people was Yasuhara. Okay. Who was the lead designer on Sonic. Right. And I'm not sure what Sega was thinking when they did this, but anyway. Maybe they didn't realize Sonic was going to be Sonic. At the same time, Naka, the lead programmer, quit Sega. And because he's kind of arrogant. Right. Now, he's one of those people that kind of earns it. He really is that good. And so I'll cut him some slack there because he really is an incredible programmer. Right. But he quit. And Sega's realizing, okay, well, we need Naka, and Yasuhara is in America. Mark Cerny was friends with Naka. And he convinced Naka to come to America. And he wouldn't directly be working with Sega. He'd be working with Mark at STI. Right. And so that's how we got the lead programmer and the lead artist for Sonic in the United States. Hence, Sonic 2 was done in the United States. Right. So, therefore, my second game I ever worked on was Sonic 2. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So that was a huge, very fortunate, incredible opportunity there.
Yeah. Some would say the best Sonic.
I would make that argument. I would be on that team. It's yeah, I would have to say that as well.
Especially with the introduction of Tails as well, I think,
Yeah.
the mascot. Yeah, I think he
Yeah.
was
And
also...
the other guy that really pushed Sonic 2 over the top was Yamaguchi, who was
Okay,
the
yeah.
lead artist.
My God, there's so many huge names in this. Yeah.
He was a machine. He lived at the office, but he's the one that came up with Tails.
Right.
And his levels were just a notch above on everything. But he redid he would redo them like from scratch like 3 times until he got them right.
Yeah.
And so he just lived at the office. And he once again, really nice guy to work with. Yasuharu was wonderful. Yasuharu, Mark Cerny, I'd come back to the industry to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Yasuharu. If Yasuharu called it, hey Craig, let's do something, I go, absolutely. He's just a very talented, very nice guy.
It seemed like even funny how these people were not that they were nobodies, but they just were maybe unknown at the time. But now,
Well, yeah, everybody was. I mean, was there anybody known? Then I'm trying to think because there wasn't enough history yet
with a big name.
These people.
It's crazy to think how now they've all branched off and done their own thing that's equally as impressive and led their own teams, made their own games. It's crazy to look back now and think how they had a really humble beginning, and nobody makes these games thinking they're going to be smash hits, but then
you're really not thinking that even on Sonic 2.
Mm-hmm.
So the first game's already this huge hit.
Yep.
And so well, you're just hoping you don't screw up.
Right, of course, yeah.
Because you're being handed an A+ hit. You're being handed a world-class title.
And you don't want to fuck up.
You don't screw it up.
Yeah, of course.
But even then, you're not... You don't realize... Well, okay, so that was 92? We shipped that 30 years ago? If you told me then, 30 years later, we would be talking about Spyro, Sonic, and there would be 2 movies, and there would be how many dozens and dozens of games and cartoons, and I would have the one piece of advice I would give to people, anybody's in the industry, actually doesn't matter what your industry is. If it's creative industry or any industry, archive stuff, keep stuff. You don't know, and I was pretty good about keeping stuff. Partially just because I like to keep it, and I like to have it. I like to keep my art and whatnot, and so I have some stuff. But I didn't really keep track of some of it, so I've lost a bunch of it.
Right? Yeah.
I don't have any of my original sketches for Kid Chameleon.
Yeah,
I had them, my maps. I had the sketches.
Yep.
They got lost somewhere.
I mean, it was interesting when Disney bought Lucasfilm, and seeing Tim Schafer go back and revisit, the stuff he made back, for Monkey Island and Full Throttle, Grim Fandango, Day of the Tentacle, and because obviously Lucas had a really great archive at the time, and someone who took that over, when they went back to remaster the games, they could go back and actually get the original drawings and sketches that they had done. But it's very rare you would find anything like that for remaster.
It really is, because it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work and consistency, because you can save all that stuff. Like I said, I saved all my stuff. I don't have it anymore because somewhere I dropped the ball.
Yeah.
And
you don't think about even sketchbooks and stuff, or it's very common, because I think it's hard to keep your art so precious. I think sometimes, depending on the memories you have with the project, sometimes you don't want to have the remembrance. You want to just move on to the next thing. So
well, you're working so hard, you're working so fast. You don't have time. You're just worried about making the schedule. You're just worried about keeping the work at the level it needs to be and getting it done on time. And you really, that's why you've got some places like Lucas. That's somebody's full-time job, is archiving.
Of course, yeah. That's where they were lucky.
If you left it up to the artists, and the programmers, nothing would get saved, because very little would, because you don't have time.
It's a whole movement now, video games preservation. There's a whole society now trying to fire up and become something like that, where they will start to archive, older games and keep them, alive in some respect on the internet. Yeah, like it's weird even thinking back to like how we do concept art now, right? Like I've got a bunch of books behind me that, are the art of different video games and they're full of sketches and whatever. But when you guys were working on stuff like Sonic the 2, when it was, pixel art, were you still physically sketching in a
Oh
sketchbook?
yeah, pencil
Right.
and paper,
Right, right,
and or pen and paper. I
right.
always did pencil.
Everyone's got their medium.
I like to erase.
Yeah, of course.
No, that was one of the things just recently here that I didn't realize what I had
Right,
was Yamaguchi had done a whole stack of drawings of
right,
different enemies, of tails,
right,
of the biplane,
right.
and I made copies of it just so
Nice.
I would have reference for stuff I was working
To
on
use.
at Third
Yeah.
Sonic. And I just recently threw that up on, I think, some Facebook page,
Mm-hmm.
and people freaked
Of course they would.
because,
Yeah.
some of it had never been seen.
Yeah. It's a piece of
Um,
history. Yeah, because a lot of that stuff wasn't like it is now with the internet, how everything's thrown out, even with concept art, with 3D stuff, like ArtStation's a thing now. So, usually when a game ships and it drops, so many months after it, the artist will drop all their artwork on ArtStation and you get to see all that, fine
uh-huh.
detail and stuff they've worked on. But back then, the internet wasn't even really a thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there was a Photoshop.
Mm-hmm.
Or what?
No, till
Yeah.
Craig Mullins really started. Not even Craig Mullins. Sorry, beg your pardon. It's not Craig Mullins because he was at Lucas at the time, but it was John. Oh my god, the name escapes me. It was him and his brother who were at Lucasfilm ILM at the time,
Uh-huh.
who invented Photoshop, and that was God. It would have been late 90s, probably something like that, closer to 2000. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think because I was just learning. I learned the first time I played with Photoshop was just as I was leaving Sega.
Right.
So 95.
Right.
And
1990 was the initial release date of Photoshop 1.0, and it was
yeah,
John and Thomas Knoll, ILM
yeah.
fame.
So 90, because prior to that, for the pixel art, there was no purpose of it.
Right, of course.
And in fact, I remember, so I was just learning, I can't remember what I was working on it with before, but then left Sega and went down to Insomniac. The first game there was Disruptor. And
Right.
so now I've got to learn Photoshop for real, because that is how the art's being done. But I was still in the pixel mentality.
Of course.
And so I'm like, well, how do we control palettes? And how do we, and all of a sudden it clicked, like, oh, I just paint.
Yeah.
I just draw.
Yeah,
and
like you would normally. Yeah.
I don't have to worry about anything. I literally, I do have a number of pixels for this tile.
Right.
But it's 100, they're big, or they're 100,
Mhm.
they're 100 pixels across, or 128 or whatever.
Right.
But I don't have to worry about palettes. I just
Yeah.
paint. And that realization was wonderful.
So that was even a thing where you kind of jumped from Sega to Insomniac, but how did that happen?
So we did Sonic 2, and somewhere in there, I pitched an idea to Sega for a game called that was called Segapede or /Astropede. And it was initially supposed to be in the Sonic universe.
Right.
It'd be this little badnik, little microscopic centipede character.
Right.
That was actually a friend of Sonic's, and Sega liked the idea. The initial pitch liked it, but they wanted to see a proof of concept, and they didn't want it in the Sonic universe.
Right.
So reworked the story, never came up with a good story. We worked up a first playable, kind of a proof of concept, which I'm trying to find the best way to get that out there and let people play it, because I finally have a playable version of it.
Yeah.
And I want to get it out there so people can see it and play it. I mean, it's buggy as all get out, but it's done in, 3 weeks or something. But so did that, and then Sega loved it, went into production, and then it got starved of resources and people, and was canceled after, I don't know, a year or so. But did Sonic Spinball, Comic Zone, a game called The Ooze, which I don't know how that game ever got out the door. So many incredible games died on the shelf.
Yeah.
At Sega, at STI.
Yeah.
And the
Comic Zone especially, like that's one of my all-time favorites as well. Like the whole jumping between the panels idea, like
way too hard of a game.
Yes, very, very true. It's almost impossibly brutal. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, fun concept. And then,
Mhm.
so I had finally had it at Sega.
Right.
Was just tired of, I don't know, 60% of your art and your work ended up on the floor.
Yeah.
Ended up being cut,
Yep.
and was having problems with management. It was just time to leave.
Right.
And Mark Cerny had left midway through Sonic 2.
Right.
And I heard he had a new group that he was putting together, and so I contacted him.
Mhm.
And so that was he was down here in LA, and was the producer for Insomniac. And
Right.
at that time, they had never made a game.
Right.
It was just three guys, the two Hastings brothers and Ted Price,
Okay.
and they needed an artist.
Yep.
And so I came down and talked with them, and it was just going to come down for just 3 months. When I realized it was in LA, because at the time I had my son was 6, and I didn't want to move to LA.
Of course.
And it's like, well, I wanted to work with Mark, and was impressed by these, by the three guys. And so came down just 3 months. 3 months here. I'll help him. I'll do the artwork, help him get this first game finished. And 11 years later, I'm still there. But yeah, so that's how I ended up in LA. It was basically I wanted to work with Mark Cerny again.
Right.
Because there's no way I would have, if I'd even heard of, although at the time they were called Extreme Games. There's no way I would have come down. It's three guys, never made a game. They're doing a Doom clone. Like, yeah. But Mark, I wanted to work with Mark, and these I did really get a good vibe off these guys when I first met them.
Right. Yeah.
And
I mean, Insomniac, now obviously is, they do incredible things and make incredible games, and they have a long history of making stuff. But it's always weird when those places start as just two people in a dream, and it's the same for even places like Naughty Dog at the time as well, right? Because that was again 2 or 3 people and just an idea. But a lot of these companies came really far and are still around, thankfully. Because a lot are.
And Insomniac and Naughty Dog, very similar backgrounds. I mean, we shared office space for quite a while.
Right.
A lot of code and a lot of stuff got shared back and forth. Mark was the producer for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so we finished Disruptor, and it didn't do very well. I mean, it's my favorite review of it. As far as the critics loved it.
Right. We
got 4 and 5 stars, and we got excellent ratings.
Yeah, of course.
But I don't know what the final numbers were. We sold nothing.
Right. Okay.
Mostly because Universal completely dropped the ball when it came to advertising.
Advertising it, right? Of course.
They didn't advertise. There was a couple of single page print ads for a month or two, and that was it.
Oh, I remember the game. Yeah. I'm just looking it up just now. I couldn't remember specifically, but the first person shooter, the UI.
I remember going into one of the game stores and going, "Hey, do you guys have Disruptor?" And he goes, "Oh, what?" This is the guy at the store.
Yeah, you didn't know what it was.
No, the guy it's on the shelf behind you there.
Yeah.
But it came, 2 things. 1, they didn't advertise it. 2, it came out at the same time as Tomb Raider.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah.
So, and then it also it was Tomb Raider, and then the Doom port, which was horrible, almost unplayable.
Is that the one for the original PlayStation?
For the PS1.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Almost unplayable.
Port,
but it was Doom.
Yep.
So,
of course.
And then one of the Star Wars, Dark Empires, one of the Star Wars games.
Right.
There was actually a pretty good port, but it was still hard.
Was it one of the first person shooter ones, the kind of Dark Knight things, or Dark Empire?
Yeah, which one was it? It was first person shooter, Star Wars. So it's Doom, Star Wars, and then Lara Croft. So we timed that horribly.
Yeah.
But then Ted just says, "Hey, everyone, take a couple of weeks, go off in your corners, come back with whatever game you think we should do next." And I think Ted came back with an alien invasion game, if I remember right, which I think eventually became Resistance. on the PS3.
Oh, wow. Okay. Right. Cool. Yeah.
I think. I'm not sure about that, but
Right.
it's probably its earliest origins.
Right.
And then um, Alex Hastings did it was an off-road racing game.
Okay.
Because in Disruptor, that we were on the Martian dunes. It was just fun just to run over these dunes. You'd catch air. It was fun.
Yeah.
Like, hey, let's make a game out of that. I don't remember what Brian pitched, but I came back with this little game where you were a dragon.
Okay.
And in the original game, you would start out as this hatchling, and you would each level you would grow into a bigger and bigger and bigger dragon.
Right.
And going to be kind of quad, not realistic, but a little more adult, a little darker environment. But basically, you get to be the dragon as opposed to riding the dragon or slaying.
Right.
And so I pitched that. We all liked that because there was just 4 of us at the company at that time.
Right.
Insomniac.
Yeah.
We pitched that to Mark. This is where Mark's superpower came into play.
Right.
He looked at it and he liked it. Because you need to make. He goes, I have 2 suggestions. Keep the dragon the same age because sequels would be easier. Oh yeah, I hadn't even considered sequels. And keep it cute and family friendly because by the time you guys get this done and it's on the shelf, the average age of the PlayStation user is going to be a couple of years younger. Right. Oh, okay. And so then we reworked it, and that was there's Spyro.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting to me even to think, Craig, because I was thinking here that you, like Sonic and other games, that you just worked on it. I didn't realize that the original idea was yours.
Yeah, Sonic, Spyro, of all the games I worked on, Spyro's the one's near and dear to me because the core, the original idea was one I pitched.
Right.
And so he's and it's like all the other games I worked on. The Sonic games, Ratchet and Clank.
Yep.
If I hadn't been there, somebody else would have done the art.
Of course.
Maybe it wouldn't have been as good. Maybe it would have been better. But the art would have been done by somebody.
Of course.
Had I not been at Insomniac, there would be no little purple dragon.
Yeah. I think how influential that little purple dragon has been over the last 20 years.
That's a little surreal to me.
Yeah.
Like just the other day. Right now I'm working at a children's museum. Which I love. And I have a little Sonic and a little Spyro pin on my hat. And this young couple comes up and says, "Oh, I love your Spyro pin." And I get talking to them. I go, "Well, I have to brag a little bit." It's like that was their game. Growing up, Spyro was their game.
I know so many people who started with, it was the simple stuff like Spyro, Crash, Crocs, loads of those games that were the mascot animal, animal human kind of hybrids. But yeah, Spyro's, I mean, the remaster was really, really great. And I think it's good when those things get updated because a lot of those older ones don't age well because you were obviously limited at the time of the technology. So
I remember we won all the awards and all these accolades for the best graphics, and you go back and you watch it now, and it's just
you're like, oh yeah, rough,
polygons are sliding around, the textures are sliding around. And
even the fact when they concepted out the new one, how when you would go to save the dragons originally, every dragon was the same that you saved. But then now they've obviously every dragon's different. They've all got their own wee personalities, their own quips. They carry different items. And that's what comes with time and patience, and obviously remaster and stuff like that.
I was, Toy Story Rob did a good job with the Reignited series. I have 2 complaints. One,
which would be valid. Yeah,
the worlds are a little bit. Actually, 3 complaints. The worlds are a little busy. Just because you can put stuff everywhere. Doesn't mean you should put stuff everywhere. And they made some color. There's a few palette changes in the worlds that are just like, why? Yeah, that's a minor one. Of course. The only one that really bugs me though is Spyro's the wrong color.
Oh, interesting.
He's very fuchsia in the Reignited series.
Yeah, he's like a dark purple almost. Like
he's a blue. He's a bluer purple in the original games.
Right.
He's almost pink and I remember when I first saw the trailers, I went,
Mhm.
okay, well that's a work in progress, right? Or it's the lighting, and it's like, no, that's it. So I actually wrote Toys for Bob.
Okay.
Well, hey, I know this is just my opinion,
Mhm.
but I chose and
Mhm.
painted the original textures for Spyro.
Yep.
I chose his color.
Yep.
So yeah, it's my opinion, but the interesting thing is Spyro wasn't always purple.
Right.
He was originally green, and
Like a
as you
kind of
mentioned,
more traditional
Croc,
dragon.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you mentioned Croc,
Mhm.
and at the same, so we got him up and got him playing,
Mhm.
and very quickly realized that two things: one, you spend a lot of time running around on grass, and
Yeah.
he's green.
Of
And
course.
two, there was Croc, there was Gex, there
Yep.
was Yoshi, and I'd swear there was
Right.
another one. There were green reptiles,
Of
mascot
course.
type characters.
Yeah.
And so I put together a videotape of Spyro in every color I could possibly make him in. And but
The purple kind of stuck out. Yeah.
purple was the one that worked, which it's
It's hard when you pick these colors thinking back now, but how could you have Spyro in any other color but purple now? It's almost impossible to think about him being anything but purple. And but it complements it really well because obviously it has that almost, well, it's yellow but kind of gold accent where his
Mhm.
horns, his chest, and his wings are all that kind of complementary. So yeah, it's interesting when you look back at it now. But then it's weird to even think, if you'd kept that sketchbook from that project like we were talking about earlier with all those initial Spyro
uh,
drawings. I mean, God, even if you would.
that's one of the things I did manage to keep was I have that videotape.
Oh, okay. Of
Now, once again,
Mhm.
when you're cranking through the stuff and you're in a hurry,
course.
the first few colors got overwritten with another animation test
Right.
because you're just reusing. Here's a tape. We don't need this anymore, and you tape over. I need a tape now,
Mhm.
but I still have that tape now. It is a 25-year-old videotape
Right.
VHS, so
Mhm.
it's all. I need to find someone that's got the right
To
hardware,
convert it.
software to
Right.
clean it up.
Yeah.
And but I've got, in fact, I've got a YouTube, my little YouTube channel with like 6 videos on it.
Yeah.
It's got him. He was actually very interesting. Blue.
Right.
He looked really nice in this kind of brick red, this kind of dragon red.
Yeah.
But back then on the old TVs, the reds just blew out, so red wasn't an option.
Mhm.
He looked really good black, but once again, you lost all detail.
Yeah. I
So
mean, it's crazy to think, like, even back in that production, how many things happened that people didn't even know about. And I remember there was a really random fact that Stuart Copeland done some of the music for
mhm,
the original Spyro the
yeah,
Dragon, which
yeah.
was crazy, absolutely crazy. Yeah, to think
And I was
about
gonna
him.
say that's so much stuff came together for Spyro. Like, having Stuart Copeland do the music
Mhm.
was awesome because the music in it is great.
Oh yeah, that little theme was a did, like that whole thing. That, yeah, like it's, you can remember it because it's the way it's produced. It's like even the Sonic,
Yeah,
like everything's kind of just ingrained in your memory. But it's good when people kind of write those wee catchy tunes. But yeah, somebody like Stuart Copeland, obviously, if people don't know, Stuart Copeland is the drummer for the Police, or
for
was
the
the drummer
police.
for,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
yeah, crazy how people got into making video game music. But yeah, I mean, so you done Spyro, and that would have took. I mean, I'm thinking now with game productions, they take 5 to 6 years sometimes. But how much time
so
did you
the
have to
so
do?
the, so so the first Spyro took 2 years,
Wow.
and then after that it was a year each.
Oh, okay, right,
So the
yeah.
first
It's
game
still
took
crazy
two
amount of
years.
short time to think about now with
Yeah,
modern budgets and stuff. Yeah.
the first one was 2 years,
Mhm.
and then Sonic 2 or Spyro 2
Mhm.
took a year, and
Mhm.
then Spyro 3 took another year. So because
Right.
you had to hit Christmas, you
Of
could
course.
not miss.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's as big of a deal now with the
Not as much.
way.
No, people just release games when they're ready. Pretty much everything
Yeah.
gets delayed
So
and pushed back,
back
and
then, if you
yeah,
missed if you missed Thanksgiving, you had to have that on the shelf in the stores before
for
Thanksgiving.
Christmas, 100%.
And
I
so
think
I
it's
guess, yeah,
because
so it's before November, as I say.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I was
For
going to say it
the
was obviously
Americans here, Thanksgiving.
yeah, yeah, definitely. No, it was. I think it was mostly because back then video game consoles were very much for kids, and the idea there was that they would be getting the consoles for Christmas and games for Christmas. But now, because video games is not just for kids, people are pretty much, it releases when it releases. So
well, and that was starting to transition by the early 2000s.
Yeah, when you came into stuff like
you had
Ratchet and
kids
Clank.
that your group.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it went both ways. Like
Mm-hmm.
Mark pointed out, by the time we got Spyro done,
Mm-hmm.
the average player on the PlayStation 1 was going to be younger.
Right.
But people don't stop playing games.
Right.
If you grew up playing games,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people continue to play games.
Mm-hmm.
So they played games into their 20s and into their 30s. You've now got 40-year-olds who grew up playing video games, and they're still playing video games.
Yeah.
So, that's one of the things that changed, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I still go back to those classics. I mean, replaying Spyro and many other games like that, even with the remastered Crash, loads of those games that you played as a kid, the love for it's still there. I mean, they've still remastered Ratchet. Well, not that they've remastered Ratchet and Clank old ones, but there's been newer ones, of course. So maybe don't feel the need to remaster those ones, and they're not that old that maybe they feel the need to be done again. But even something like Jack and Daxter, I'm just waiting for the day for that to come back as well, because it was a very beloved franchise.
It possibly will, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was one of the things we really wanted when we did Spyro, that there just wasn't anything. There wasn't anything.
Yeah.
Was merchandise.
Of course,
I think they did a stuffed animal. Taco Bell had some toys.
Right.
But that was it.
Nothing official.
I really wanted some T-shirts and towels and hats and toys, and it didn't happen.
There's on you go.
Well, but then jump ahead a few years.
Yeah.
And I'm walking through a store, and I turn this aisle, and it's Spyro down both sides of the aisle.
Of course. Yeah.
Lunch boxes and T-shirts and everything. I'm like, what? But I get looking, it's like, wait a minute, that's not Spyro, but that is Spyro, and it was Skylanders.
Of course.
And they took poor little Spyro and beat him with the ugly stick, but he was still Spyro, and it reintroduced. I think one of the reasons Spyro, we're still talking about Spyro today, of course, is Skylanders. That reintroduced him to a whole new generation
of people,
of kids and people, and so that just kicked it back off, and it's just taken off again now.
Of course, no, 100%. I was going to say there's a figure company, I think somewhere in Malaysia, called First for Figures, and they have done a Spyro statue that I've always looked at, and it's just
maybe the one I was looking at. It does a nice job.
It's huge. It's absolutely massive, but it's him standing on top of a jewel with his paw on a jewel. But then it's like it's so well done. I mean, they've done a bunch of figures with Spyro now. They've done a whole range of stuff with him. But I think it is one of these things that people are realizing. I mean, back when Lucas done his original pitch for Star Wars, he knew that the money was going to be in the toys, right? That was a whole thing he knew was going to make people want to spend money, was the merchandising. Yeah. So I think for games, and Mario, obviously they capitalized on that early, but then Nintendo were a toy company originally, so it made sense that they would see that potential. But then other places, maybe not as much, especially with PlayStation at the time, because even then, back then, like, there was a whole fight for who was going to be Sony's mascot, and I think in the end, Crash kind of won that in a sense early on.
It was interesting. It kind of did, but then at the same time, or about that time when they decided we're not going to do the mascot thing,
right?
And they went with just the 4 symbols,
right? Of course,
the brand, because I remember. So it was the E3 the Electronic Entertainment Expo.
Yep.
In LA.
Way back in the day.
The first one for Spyro was in Atlanta.
Okay.
And then, but I remember, like, the next year, or maybe the year before. Anyway, we're here in LA, and you go up in this huge convention center downtown LA, and here's this 3-story tall banner of Crash.
Right.
And I think at that time we were working on Spyro, because I remember looking up at that, going, okay, next year that's going to be Spyro. And because that was the big difference between Disruptor and Spyro. Is Disruptor, Universal was in charge of all the publishing and distributing and everything. When we pitched Spyro, Sony went, we want that.
Yeah.
We're going to advertise that. We're going to do the ones pushing that. So instead of spending $10,000, they spent $10 million,
Wow.
or whatever the numbers were. It was about that big of a difference.
I can imagine.
And so, so I was all excited because I really was expecting the next year to have this, 3-story banner. And the next year is when Sony decided, okay, no, we're just going to do the brand. And they just pushed Sony.
Right.
And they did their 4 little symbols, and their advertisements were much more Sony oriented versus individual games, which I think was a good call on their part. They could have done it the next year. As far as I'm concerned, I still wanted my big Spyro banner.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. I mean, it's one of these things that, again, like you said, you don't expect it to take off like it did, but, I think even then back then, Spyro was almost, it done well, but it wasn't as hugely received. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
It
now,
did good, but it built.
yeah, over time.
Yeah, word of mouth. And one of the interesting things on Spyro, and it's because when Mark came back and he says, okay, from that original pitch,
Mm-hmm.
and said, hey, keep it cute, keep it family friendly. We ended up skewing a little younger than we'd planned.
Right.
And a little cuter. But I think that turned out to be perfect. Because so we got an even younger crowd. We got the moms.
Right.
But we didn't lose anybody. It wasn't so cute that people went, oh, that's a kiddie game.
Right. Yeah.
Because I also answered all the fan mail at the time. And I would get letters from parents, specifically, I remember moms. Oh, my daughter is stuck on this level, or my son is stuck on this level. And do you have any suggestions or hints?
Yeah.
And at the bottom of the letter, she'd say, by the way, I'm stuck on level such and such. And then you kind of go, by the way, you guys are horrible because there's no one to tell me to put the controller down at 2 a.m.
Right. Of course.
And so you had parents playing the game. I mean, what kid doesn't go, Mom, Dad, come watch me play, or Mom, Dad, come play this game with me?
Right.
And it's usually boring to watch somebody else play a game.
Right. Yeah.
Most of these games were too complicated for a parent to just pick up and play. Spyro was simple enough. He was cute, so Mom could sit and watch him play, and it was fun.
Mm-hmm.
And it was simple enough she could pick up, or they could pick it up and play.
Yeah.
And they get addicted. And
the rest is history, really.
I think that's also one of the reasons Sonic was so successful. Is stupid simple.
Yeah.
No complex. Easy. You had some more complex gameplay kind of stuff in there if you wanted to, but you could just run.
Yeah.
And have fun.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's one of these things as well that, again, you think after one particular hit, you don't think you're going to get hit another one. But then, like I said, you've done all those games for Sega, which of course were legendary in the time. Then you hit Spyro, which you were almost the entire creator of. Of course, you had a team behind you and people working. But then you land on also Ratchet and Clank next, which again, huge franchise, still going today, movies, merchandise, multiple games.
Yeah, that was a fun game to work. I had, as opposed to Spyro, I had no input on Ratchet and Clank.
Right.
And that one came together quite well. Actually, there was a game in the middle there, right after Spyro, called, we never even got a title for it. It was Stick Girl.
Okay.
It was going to be beautiful. The graphics it was absolutely gorgeous. We worked on it for, I think, 8 months.
Right.
And after about 8 months, Ted Price comes in and goes, okay, I've got good news and bad news. The bad news is we're gonna cancel Stick Girl. The good news is we're canceling Stick Girl. It wasn't any fun. It did, even if we'd finished it, it would have had this very niche market.
Yeah.
I mean, we could have made it fun. It would have eventually been an interesting game. And that's when it broke off. It's like, okay, what are we doing? And I'm not even sure. It seemed very quickly.
Yeah.
Ratchet and Clank came into existence and the characters, it really seemed to fall into place.
Was that another pitch where people were told to go away and make something, and then somebody pitched that?
I really don't remember. I don't remember going off and coming up with any ideas. Well, I had one little idea,
Mhm.
but I think that's after I'd already seen some stuff from Ratchet, and I just
Right.
I mean, initially I was like, oh, I don't, okay, well, this it's not doing anything for me.
So then you were working on Ratchet, but then what were you specifically doing on that game?
For Ratchet, I was an environment artist, and artist and art director.
Mhm.
Same thing on the Spyro games. So Spyro, I did the environments.
Mhm.
I did all the skies.
Right.
Spyro.
Yep.
Which was that's something I did not want to do when I first heard about it. It was tedious and horrible, and did not
like
want
making
to
actual skyboxes.
Yeah, because they when you first did them, they were miserably tedious to do and complicated.
Yep.
Turned out to be one of my favorite things to do.
Oh, well, that's good.
Because Al Hastings, the programmer, kept making better and better tools.
Right, yeah.
So I could get fancier and fancier and more artistic, and so it turned out to be one of my favorites. But Ratchet and Clank, same thing. So I just environments. So
was this 3D or 2D?
This is 3D.
Okay. Oh wow. Okay. Cool.
Well, so you do the sketches in 2D, and then that process changed over time as to how much. Sometimes the game designers would initially say, "Here's the world," and give you a text write-up of what the world is, and you would create the images to go with that, the look.
It's interesting because that is now two separate jobs, right? You have 2D environment artists and you have 3D environment artists. Yeah.
So back then, back then, the 3D artists were in fact coming up with the 2D sketches.
Right.
Now sometimes it's like a lot of this. Yeah, no, it was initially you did both. You do the sketches and some of the best stuff. John Ferrarito, who I'm not sure if he's still at Insomniac. I don't think he was.
Yeah.
His architectural sketches. His style was Ratchet and Clank. That became because a lot of his sketches are what a lot of the worlds were built on, and then everyone built off that look.
Right.
So even some of my favorite levels that I did are based on his sketches.
Right.
And so it's building the worlds. Had very little to do with, or nothing to do with enemies or gameplay and story and that kind of stuff. But it was a fun game to work on. It was a style that was very natural for me.
Right.
Sonic or Spyro, I had to work at. It was a softer, more painterly look that I had to kind of learn.
Right.
Where Ratchet and Clank was my kind of default science fiction-y kind of look.
Right. Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's interesting to think as well, how much influence you had in those games, even because the teams were so small. I mean, it feels like now
they really were.
Yeah, the big companies now, the environment team's like 50 people. I mean,
it was magical. It really was. You go back to Spyro and you go back to Ratchet and Clank, the early Ratchet and Clanks. Very small team. Well, the first Spyro was done with like 12 people.
Wow. That's an indie studio now.
Yeah, and it's so yeah. When I started, there was I think there was like 12 people on Spyro.
And you were one of them.
Yeah, it started with 4.
Yeah.
And then we hired a couple more artists and a couple more designers. One more designer and a couple of programmers and a set. And that's not counting because sound. That was all done externally at that point.
And you've got producers and CEOs and money people and
but
the art team was 12
the actual development team, the programmers, artists, and designers.
Yeah,
I think there's 12 of us.
Crazy.
But then Ratchet and Clank, I think the first one. How many people? I can't remember how many people were on the first team, but I know. By the time I left, so right at the end of Ratchet Deadlock, I had 15 people under me doing just environments.
Right.
Was it 15? It sounds like a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably about right.
I had more people under me than made the original Spyro.
Yeah. Which is crazy to think about.
yeah, and the worlds. It's actually one of the frustrating things making games, and I'm sure this is true today.
Of course.
Of
Yeah.
no matter, you finish a game and you finally you've got it figured out.
Yep.
And you get the system, and you got the pipeline, and everything's working right, and you know your tools, and you know your software, and then you go to do the next game, and it's all completely different. Either you've changed, you've gone from the PS whatever to the next PS system, or
100%.
something's changed. It's like, oh, we've got it. You're just all over again.
Because games get to a point now where they're almost too big and there's too much in it. It's like games like The Witcher or other games that are 300-400 hours worth of content. It's like you just can't play that much. It's almost like a job. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there needs to be. Yeah, there's a balance there somewhere.
Yep.
But it's what's a good example of scale of how much bigger. And this is okay. This is generations ago. So this is the PlayStation 1.
Right.
If you took a large Spyro world, it was about 8,000 polygons for the entire world.
Of course.
And I think Spyro was like 400 polygons. I can't remember for sure, but I know a big world, our limit, a hard limit, was 8,000 polygons for the world.
Wow.
Jump ahead to PS2, Ratchet and Clank.
Yep.
So I don't know if you remember this, but for the first Ratchet game, it's Metropolis.
Yeah.
So you walk down and you walk through this arch, and you're standing on this little platform, and there's this big boulevard going down, and then flying cars back and forth, and these skyscrapers going down, and this big pyramid-shaped building at the far end of the boulevard.
Remember it well. Yeah.
There was the train station that you're working your way to.
Mm-hmm.
That train station, the big pyramid building, was 8,000 polygons. The one building was 8,000 polygons. The footprint of that building was the size of a Spyro world.
Yeah. Crazy to think about. Yeah.
The scale there, and the amount of polygons and the amount of art, and so.
But then you worked on how many Ratchet games? 3?
The first 4.
4, right? Yeah.
So the first 4.
1, 2, 3, and Deadlock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I was just, they had started work on Resistance on the PS3 while we were finishing up Deadlock.
Right.
And so we finished Deadlocked, and at this point, I'm already starting to have the beginnings of my nervous breakdown.
Right. Which is unfortunate, of course.
Really having a hard time focusing, really having a hard time doing and getting anything done.
Yep.
And so we finished Ratchet, and I learned all the new software and all the new, because everything completely changes going from the PS1 to the PS2.
Yeah,
so
now you're talking next-gen stuff. Yeah.
So I learned all the new software for the artists for building the worlds. Completely different system of building stuff. You're not building stuff really with polygons anymore. You kind of are, but not literally taking polygons and stitching them together.
Is this like the era of like kind of Maya Max kind of things?
I'm trying to remember.
Or ZBrush or stuff like that, or
you could start. Yeah, there was some ZBrush stuff. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah,
but it was you were able to do a lot more, and the computer would simplify it down and make it a an engine playable model.
Yeah.
So I learned all that software. Sat down, taught my team, taught the environment team how to do it. Sat down to do it myself, and blank.
Yeah.
I would sit there and just be paralyzed, not knowing how to make a box. I mean, literally, I was making a box. Little foot locker.
Of course.
Couldn't
do it.
Couldn't make the simplest decisions.
Yeah.
Of stuff, and just crashed and burned. And was very politely asked to resign.
Which is a shame, because to think the history you had at that company also, and how much you helped make those worlds.
It's hard because my perspective is my perspective. It's very limited, and so I know what I used to think, and I'd love to know real answers here. At the time, and I'm still not completely convinced this wasn't the case.
Mm-hmm.
They had been wanting me to leave for several years.
Right.
Because I had, when I first started there, I was kind of the golden boy.
Right.
I already had several, a couple of million seller titles under my belt.
Yeah.
And came in, and so I would, in fact, I remember on 2 different occasions having Ted scare the crap out of me because working on Spyro, I'd be behind. So I'd be there at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night working, trying to catch up, and Ted would come and tap me on the shoulder. Hey, can I see you in my office? I'm like, oh crap. I'm busted here because I'm behind schedule. And he pulled me into his office and go, hey, Craig, we couldn't do this without you. Here's a 10% raise. Oh, okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Go back to my work. And that happened twice. I think one of them was a 10%, one of them was like a 6 or an 8% raise, just out of nowhere. We couldn't do this without you. Thank you very much for putting that effort in. Jump ahead, and somewhere probably during Ratchet 3 or maybe even in 2. I should have left after Ratchet 1, but anyway. I'm working along. Ted, hey, can I see you in my office? Like, yeah, sure. Go in, and he says, now I didn't flinch. I'm not worried now. And he goes, hey, yeah, you've been late on a couple of levels. If you're late on this one, we're going to have to fire you.
Oh.
And I'm like, oh, well, it didn't register. It literally, I'm a little slow when it comes to that kind of stuff. Even today, it's just like, if something's so unexpected, my brain, it takes some time for it to catch up.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'll put some extra time in. So I went to lunch, and I'm sitting at lunch, and all of a sudden I went, what the? Did he just threaten to fire me?
Yeah.
I mean, it was like a half hour later, all of a sudden something clicked. I'm like, what the? And I go back into his office. I go, did you just threaten to fire me? He's like, yeah. He says, I was surprised you didn't react more. And I go, yeah, because it's completely out of the blue BS. Everyone's behind schedule all the time. And then, of course, the next level was Metropolis. For Ratchet. Actually, this was Ratchet 1.
Right.
This was Ratchet 1. Because the next level was Metropolis, which was the level we had completely faked to pitch Ratchet and Clank to Sony.
Yeah.
And we completely faked that level. And now we had to do it for real.
People still do that to this day.
Well, that's how you do it. That's because you don't have the technology yet. You don't have everything.
You fake it.
So everything was forced perspective, and it was all flat, and you only move from this little area because everything is looking down. Anyway. And so I get assigned the next level I get after this talk of being fired, Metropolis, and they roll the map out, and it's half again bigger than we've set our max limit at. Yeah. And I just went, no, this is physically impossible. You've got to cut at least a third of this off, if not more. This can't be done. And Ted just looks at me and says, no, you do it. You're going to do it. And I did it. Not only that, because at that point we got 2 artists on each level because the worlds are just too big.
Yeah.
But the artist I was working with was having a rough time.
Right.
He was going through some depression and anxiety and buying a house and all this other chaos. And so he was a wreck. And at the time I was not very understanding, and I really wish I had been, because I now know what he was going through. But in the end, it was fine because I ended up doing like 95% of the level. And so now it's one thing where I can look at, it's like, okay, there's that little pile of rocks over there. Yeah, he did that. The rest of this is mine.
Yeah.
And I remember Ted looked at me when it was all done and was playable, and he's like, oh, yeah, you're good. Your job's not on the line anymore.
So when you left, I mean, you talk about, now, unfortunately, and you can talk as much or as little of this as you want, but, you talk about an almost PTSD thing now where art for you is a kind of dead thing. You talked about just before we started recording how you're kind of just getting back into art, to the fact that you're drawing and painting again, but for a long time you couldn't even touch a pencil.
Yeah, I would sit to draw, and it was just blank.
Yep.
writer's block. It was almost painful
Yep.
to try and draw, try and be
Mhm.
creative. And just in the last 6 months, maybe a year,
Right.
and part of that has to do with people like yourself,
Mhm.
and talking to people and finding out how much my art has meant to people around the world.
100%. Yeah.
And just talking to so many people who
Yeah.
were affected and liked and loved my art.
I'm looking for
It,
something particular. Wait, keep talking. Keep going, talking about your art. I'm just
but
looking for something.
it started eroding away that corrosive, wow, yeah, PTSD stuff I hauled away from the last year or two at Insomniac, and started to get my confidence back. And so, yeah,
One of my treasured books in my collection is this. And
because I remember Jonfer, called and asked if I had any original art. Because I think there's only one piece of art of mine in there, and it's a horrible piece. I hate it.
yeah,
I don't hate it.
it's hard to see them, but you can see some of the early sketches and stuff.
Yeah. So I wish, because he asked me, and I was a little afraid that if I gave them anything, I would never get it back.
Right.
And I don't have too much, but I've got some concept or some world sketches.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's one of these things, like you said, it's hard to, might even been hard at that point as well when the book was coming out, because again, you maybe still were in the midst of identity crisis, PTSD.
Yeah.
You weren't thinking about, yeah. So
Yeah, I wasn't. It was very.
even opening the sketchbooks might have been difficult for you. You know what I mean?
It was. It was. I can remember being in a comic book store, Santa Monica or somewhere, and seeing it. Like, oh, there's that one that John was talking about. And it's like, do I open this?
Yeah. It's like opening the Holy Grail at this point. You're like, oh God, like the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah.
So
I mean, I think it's difficult because we also talked beforehand about the difficulties I've had as well with depression, and trying to make it in the industry, because it's fucking hard. Like, let's not sugarcoat it. Now, try to get in the games industry in this day and age is extremely difficult. There's such a high bar to enter before people will even give you the first note of attention. I've been lucky. I've been able to travel the world and network really well, so a lot of people know me. So I've had more advantage than others. But yeah, like, it is a very rough industry. I know so many people who have left, burnt out, and I almost quit. Funny story, almost a week ago, because I was on a year contract with a company, and just as the year was coming up to an end, they basically said, "There's no more work. We're going to have to let you go at the end of this month." And I was almost giving up, but luckily, the network I had built of professionals and senior guys kind of rallied around me and said, "Don't give up. You're so close. Don't take it as a defeat. See it as like, that happened. Okay, on to the next thing." And it's hard. It really is hard. But then, I'm glad that I had the community. But yeah, people like yourself who were veterans who kind of started the industry basically. It's almost a shame to see you at this point where you don't want to do stuff anymore. And there's so many vets now, I think, who are lucky, who have kept a passion. I remember watching a documentary about John Romero and how he's really kept, a whole love of the industry, and is maybe not making big AAA titles anymore, but is still, making his own stuff. And I think that's the key I've seen to burnout is a couple of things. But one thing I've seen that's consistent is that you have to have a life outside of your work. If you can have a balance of having, a hobby or an interest or doing personal projects, so you're making worlds or games of your own outside of your 9 to 5, that's the thing that keeps the flame alive and doesn't really allow you to die in that sense. Because if it's just for somebody else constantly, that's where the slow death comes, because you're constantly fulfilling somebody else's fantasy, somebody else's dream.
And you're constantly the whole the imposter syndrome, which I had never heard of until a few years ago.
Yep.
And my daughter-in-law was asking me about my time in the game industry and why I left.
Of course.
And I can't remember the conversation. But basically, she's the one that says, no. What you're dealing with, what you dealt with was imposter syndrome.
Yep.
Was because as soon as she explained it to me, it's like, holy crap. Because I can remember my first days at STI at Sega.
Right.
So we're in this little tiny little office, and we're all seated in there, and I'm like, oh crap, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
They're going to figure this out, and I'm going to get fired before I even get started.
Yep.
That never went away.
Yeah. It never goes away. Never.
And it's comforting to know everybody feels that at some point.
100%. Yep.
And I think that's where it snapped. Is I've never been able to do freelance artwork.
Right.
I just shut down.
Right.
I could do the same exact art if it was my job at some place that I was employed.
Yep.
So it's all in my head.
Mm-hmm.
At some point at Insomniac, even though I was constantly dealing with this imposter syndrome, it's like, oh, they're going to figure out I'm not as good as they think I am. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm faking it. They're going to figure it out. And then they started coming after me of, hey, you're making more money than your job title says. It's like, well, you're the ones that gave me the raise. Don't get and hey, you're doing this and you're doing this, and I get this distinct feeling that what's that imposter syndrome of, oh, these young kids coming right out of college can paint circles around me, can draw circles around me, and they can hire 5 of them for what they're paying me. But that's the fears. That's that imposter syndrome talking. Except for then Insomniac followed through and fired me and replaced me with like 4 people.
Yeah. It's hard also to keep up with the current industry trends as well. I mean, I know people in your position who would then say, right, well, I don't want to do the technology thing anymore. I'm going to go into recruitment, directing, leading, where you make less art, but you make more decisions.
Well, see, that was the problem, is they wanted me to do more management kind of stuff and less art. It's like, no, just let me do my art. Let me just.
But then you're in a position where, with your experience and contacts and the things you've done, you can do things for yourself. If you want to make your own game, your own worlds, your own characters, there's plenty of people I know now who are doing that to get their own TV series pitched or their own game made. And there's plenty of studios that now we're going back to try and find veterans because, there's people, they've got experience to a certain degree, but then they're losing a lot of their leads or seniors, and they're trying to replace those rapidly, but they can't because people are too young or don't have enough experience or haven't shipped any titles. So I think it's one of these slow burns. I think if it was something you wanted to get back into, if you were thinking that maybe, in a couple of years or maybe in the next year or whatever.
So yeah, if the right people, if it was a small team, see, that's the other thing that I missed. And that was the transition. And it's just kind of the way the world works, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Is you become successful, so therefore you have to change. A company becomes successful, so therefore they have to change.
Yeah.
It's like Insomniac, when they were small, literally everybody, you'd have an idea meeting. The entire company would be in the conference room. Everyone would be sharing their ideas. Everyone had input. Everyone felt like the product, the game was theirs because they're all putting this stuff in. And then you got bigger and bigger and bigger. Because I can remember, like, initially, literally the entire company would go out to lunch together almost every day. And then it got to the point where you would you knew people's names, you knew what they did, but you didn't work directly with them. But you saw them and you knew who they were.
You were another department or something.
You're another department, but you knew them. You'd talk to them at lunch. You'd see them. And then it got to be where you would know their name, or you would know they were a programmer, but you didn't know their name.
Right.
Or you knew they were a design, and then you got to where, okay, I know you must work here because you're here. I don't know your name. I don't even know what department you're in.
Yeah, of course.
Because there's now 70 people or 100 people in the company versus 12 or 20.
Yeah.
And so it shifts there. So there was a handful of people that I would be interested to go back in. It's frustrating because, like, there's that Astropede game that I pitched at Sega that I got the first playable for.
Yeah.
And I've been in contact with the programmer and some other people trying to figure out what do we do with it.
Yeah.
I would love to see it finished.
Of course.
And if I didn't seize up every time I thought about doing something like that again, I would jump on the ball and track the people. Because if I hunted around, I have enough connections that I could find people.
Yeah.
To get me hooked up with the right people to do whatever needs to be done.
Start your own game studio, Craig.
Yeah, but that's where
the great thing
even
about
as you say that, I can feel the back of my throat.
Yeah, it's twinging. It's twinging. Yeah. Well, I think it's
different. That's a wonderful idea.
Of course. But then, But I think the good thing now is that I think the way you would approach it is you would take it at your own pace, right? And the good thing about the way we've worked now because of COVID is remote working. So, you can launch a studio from your bedroom or your spare room or wherever you are now. You don't need a physical office anymore. You don't need to pay people insurances and health. You contractors, people freelance working for however much in other countries. And the good thing about when my art director employed me is that I'm in Scotland, so I paid a lot less than guys in LA, that are in the Bay Area that take, absorbent amounts of money. So there's a whole thing where now online you can basically, especially because Unreal is free, it's so accessible, there's so many things you can do for nothing. There's more and more avenues to make things for almost no money.
Yeah. The problem for me though is once again, as I say, it's been just the last 6 months where I've even been able to draw again.
No, of course, and take that at your own pace.
And so it's where I there's a part of me that wants to knows I have the skill set, knows I have the knowledge, and yet the last time I sat down literally just to draw just a random little doodly monster in my sketchbook.
Yep. Yeah.
It didn't happen.
I think it's because you're putting too much pressure on the aspect of what you're drawing and what it's for.
I'm way overthinking it. I'm letting my anxieties and my fears and that's where if I could find the right people. Yeah. That not that they always pat me on the back, oh, you're a good little boy, you can do this kind of stuff, but just innately, Mark Cerny. Now, Mark can be very difficult to work with.
No, of course.
People, at least 20 years, 15 years ago, you loved Mark or you hated Mark.
Yeah.
And I loved working with him. Because I could put up with his little idiosyncrasies because I knew how talented he was. Yeah. And
it's one of these things I think he'd maybe just, you could reach out to people again from that life just to almost connect, just to talk to them as human beings. It doesn't have to be a thing where you're trying to get involved in.
Yeah, I've been thinking about contacting Mark and just meeting for lunch.
Of course, just simple stuff like that. Yeah, just talk to him about. I mean, one of the things I'll say to Craig is that the way I've kind of dealt with my imposter syndrome and the depression in the industry is I've sought counselling. So I've went to a therapist. I've went to somebody who I talk to my problems about, and then also journal daily, get my thoughts into a page out of my head somewhere. Because I'm an overthinker, probably like you. So I think the more you can drag out of your head and put on a bit of paper, there's less rolling about at night. Yeah. It definitely has helped me. So there's certain things.
I'm glad to say I'm off my meds. I mean, in a good way. I haven't been on any medication for 10 years now.
Okay. Progress. Yeah.
There are days where I'm like, okay, maybe I should go back.
I think you have to be very gently, very, and I think the whole idea of doing something by yourself is good because then the pressure isn't on from some external source. You are the only pressure. You're the only thing. Yeah.
It's interesting that there's, the group of people, I say, I work at a children's museum now, and I'm not like organizing. I'm literally on the floor. It's a minimum wage job playing with the kids. Yep. And I love it. And so most of my coworkers are 20 to 30 years old. Right. Most of them on the younger side there. And a lot of them kind of freak out when they find out what I've done for my living. It's like, oh, I grew up with that.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Actually, I had my supervisor do that one day. It's like he knew I made games, but he didn't know I made Spyro. And
especially if you got somebody who came to work at the museum who was a game design student or like an art student trying to work in the games industry, they'd be like, oh my God, like, that would be even More, yeah.
So I'm always having people say, "Hey, oh, we should do something together." Actually, we have a very, very creative group of people right now because there's a lot of coming and going. It's a lot of summer jobs and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And this past post COVID, a bunch of very talented artists and musicians and that kind of stuff. I've been trying to figure out something where we all just get together and just feed off each other's energies.
Yeah.
For the first time, because I always have people, we should do something together. I do some project together. And I'm like, oh, that'd be nice. And I actually think that's like, yes, that would be nice. But recently here, there's one of the young women there that said that, and it's something about her personality.
Yep.
Or something, the conversations we've had, where I'm like, I actually want to, I think I can do this.
Yeah.
I definitely need to do it. And so
I think it would be a waste.
Hopefully the next day or two, she and I are going to get together and find some way of collaborating and mixing her art and her photography and my painting together to do something. I need to break that wall. I need to break that barrier.
Of course. But what I was saying is I think it'd be a waste for that to kind of go away and for you never to really re-enter and make something again. I think it's like me when I played music for a living, and I would go on stage and play music, and once you played live, you've always got the bug, right? It never really goes away, and you always look at things and think, I would love to get back into doing this or that, and you think yourself, it's not the right time, it's not the right thing, blah, blah. Like there's always an excuse you come up with, but I think sometimes you just kind of got to force yourself to just push past the initial, which is difficult because of course, your past is marred in so many things that aren't great for you, and you haven't got great memories in certain aspects. But yeah, the future's there. You never know what would be around the corner if you just keep going.
Yeah.
So
and it's to say it's doing things like this. It's talking to people. It's sharing, and getting that feedback. It offsets all the paranoia.
Yeah, of course.
And because it helps. It's you said something just a few minutes ago of what did you say? It was something along the lines of it'd be a shame if I didn't do anything again. And the way you said it, or in conjunction with what you said, and it'd be a shame not just for me, but for the fans. If I look back at my favorite musicians, or my favorite artists, or movies that all of a sudden it just stopped. Yeah, and it's like no, the fan. It's very surreal for me to say I have fans.
Yeah. Well, you do. I mean, I'm one of them.
I do. It's there's a strength in knowing that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, 100%.
Because I want to share. I want to give them something because they've given me so much.
Yeah. That was also, we talked about how I almost gave up as well, but apart from the people in the industry that didn't want me to stop, I also had people who were fans of the podcast reach out and say, look, I love what you do. Your podcast has changed my life. It's really inspired me. I had a kid, he was 30, emailed me last year, and he was like, I was really inspired by your journey of like giving up your job and going to chase your dream. Like, I'm turning 30 this year, and I've just handed in my resignation. I'm going back to art school. And he just emailed me recently, and he was like, dude, I just completed my first year. Here's all the stuff I've been working on. And
That's
I was
huge.
like, tears. I was like, oh my God, like, and I think I'm nobody, but the more and more I go internationally and go to events, people keep recognizing me and speaking to me about how much the podcast means to them. And it's crazy.
That's huge. Because that's one of the reasons I went into art. Was my whole family is very artistic and very musical. But nobody went into it career-wise. My oldest brother almost did, but he didn't want to risk ruining his hobby by making it a career.
Very valid, yeah.
But it was a high school art teacher.
Right.
I was doing a project. She goes, you could make a living at this. And for some reason, having somebody who wasn't family say that made me think. And so I was heading that direction in college, and then it ended up shifting over and decided I wanted to teach because I wanted to give I wanted to do for somebody what she had done for me.
Right.
Was to teach and give that encouragement and give that. And then I got sidetracked into computer graphics and video games that I never taught.
Of course.
But that same giving, that same encouragement you're giving people. I mean, the fact that you affected somebody's life is huge. I mean, that's
crazy.
I don't know what our reason for being in this world is, but that's one of them for sure.
Yeah, 100%. If you feel like you're making a difference to people's lives, it's something that you can't explain how incredible it is. It's weird to think that, you know, again, like you said, I'm a person where, you know, I don't think that I'm anybody in special. You know, I don't think that I'm anybody that should be noteworthy or somebody that, you know, anybody should pay attention to. But for some reason, people like me. For some reason, people listen to the podcast, and for some reason, people email me. And it's. I think it's just I try to be very transparent about my life, about the difficulties and the successes. So, you know, as far as I've been told and telling people about the job I got last year, now I'm quite open that, you know, the depression's hitting again because I've lost my job or I don't have any more work. So, yeah, people almost love that just as much because they struggle as well. And when they're like, well, if you struggle, you know.
I'm going to guess, okay, I was having, basically, my daughter-in-law was basically telling her almost verbatim what you were just saying. You know, I've been at the right place at the right time. I'm really not that good. I'm really this. I'm really that. I'm really that. And she just looks at me and goes, bullshit. And it really got me off guard. It's like, what? She doesn't mince words. She's very open about her feelings and her thoughts, and she's very smart.
Yeah.
She goes on to explain to me about the whole, you know, now it's slipped my brain. Imposter syndrome stuff, and you know, and she called me out on it. You were just beating yourself up there, and I was beating myself up with her, and I still do, and I have to remind myself, like, okay, what did Hannah say? Bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and
you have to kill that little voice in your head.
Yeah, and so it's and we don't know. Like you said, the one guy you were just talking about that contacted you said, hey, I've got my this and I did this and I've changed. I've done all this because of you. How many people do we not know that we have no idea?
How many people played Spyro the Dragon and then decided to start drawing?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You know, and it's one of the things that I'm trying to do is I want to get all my art and get all this stuff and get these stories and get them out someplace for the average fan, the average person to see and hear and look at it, because the fans they're hunting this stuff up. You know, they're online looking for the artwork or the things they enjoy. They're digging, looking for it, and they're finding it, and that's awesome. I'm glad that they're finding it. I wanted the average person who just played it. And maybe they started drawing, or maybe they started doing something because of it, but they're not looking for it. But get it out there where more people can see it.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it might even be a thing like me where you might start a YouTube channel, right? And just start talking about your experiences.
Yeah.
Doing art tutorials or showing people your old sketchbooks, and people would love that shit. They would really love it.
I've got a friend at work that's got a whole, he's on all social media he's got all these different stuff going on. He goes, I'll help you set up a camera so that you can do a, you know, live, you know, sketch kind of
drawings
thing.
And stuff, yeah.
You know, so, but that's where my fears kick in.
Of course.
It's like, oh, great idea. Oh, I don't know.
I think it's a slow burn. You need to really just incrementally just do little things every so often, and, you know, start with a drawing, you know, and then a wee couple of things, and, you know,
I can just get everything I've got done. Yeah, on a web page of some kind, or even if it's just a Facebook page, just something.
Even just start a blog again, or I mean, the ArtStation's a great thing now. I mean, like, it's very easy to upload stuff there and run blogs and upload art stuff, and I mean, there's multiple things. Squarespace is very available now for making websites.
DeviantArt, and
there's a ton of places you can upload stuff. Yeah. I would say the hardest thing to do is just start and then go for there. It's always the hardest thing, is just to push the first piece out and then just let it go into the ether. So, yeah. Okay, well, I mean, that's a great kind of note to end on, Craig, and I don't want to take too much more of your time up, but yeah, I mean, it's been great talking to you.
I've enjoyed this. I've really enjoyed this.
I'm glad. But then if I had anything to close say, I would say, yeah, don't give up. People done it for me almost a week ago, and I'm going to do it for you now, saying that we love your art, we love what you've done in the past, you're a legend in the industry. Don't fade away. I think you've got a lot more to offer. So yeah, keep the faith.
Well, thank you. That really, it really does help. It really is getting me out of this malaise I've been in for the last 10 years, 15 years. So,
but burnout's like that. It can take a long time to repair the process. So it's very, very, very apt. So, okay, guys, if you've listened to this point, thanks very much. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the ramblings. I'm sure there was something of fact or fiction or just inspiration in there. And if you want to help the podcast, check us out on YouTube. We have a video version there. You can see our beautiful faces. You've also got your usual podcast as well. So we're on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, all that kind of stuff. If you want to listen to us, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Any kind of questions or any kind of interest for Craig, you can leave comments down below. I'll leave his details as well for some of his websites or any other social media he has at the time. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks to Craig for coming on. Thanks to you guys for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye, guys.
Thank you.